Well, hello, and welcome to this week's episode of The Green Room. We're so glad that you're joining us. Hopefully you're getting a lot out of The Green Room. And man, we would encourage you guys, because their plan is to continue forward with The Green Room, we would encourage you guys to continue to meet with your groups and unpack this each week. We try to give you a lot of bonus content from the message, and we have the speaking pastor up here each week to be able to dive a little bit further into that. So hey, give me some feedback, and we listen to that, and we try to continue to give you guys value each week through The Green Room. Today, I got Pastor Gary with us. Today, he talked about indecision. And man, I love that because you used the squirrel analogy. And man, how many of us, especially here on the shore, you see those squirrels crossing the road and they're back and forth, and you talked about that. But one of the things that stuck out to me today in the message is you talked about how God speaks to us and impressions. And oh man, it just got me thinking. And I was like, I know as I go about my day, I get a lot of impressions. How do I discern if that's from me, because that inner voice, or if that's from God? So I'd like to hear you kind of unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, so the whole impressions thing, that can be pretty nebulous, right? I mean, I honestly think that it might feel a little bit different for different people, how that works. What I do know is we can have confidence that when we accept Christ, He sends the Holy Spirit to come live in our hearts. And so God is there, and He wants to guide us, even in real time. and two, sometimes that guidance comes through this kind of gut check feeling. For me, the way that feels, it feels like kind of a lack of a peace about it. Like, this just doesn't set right. Like, why should I do that? And what I found is the way I dialed in personally to be able to discern what His voice was by choosing to be obedient to it and then seeing what happens. So I gave the example in the message of this one TV show. There's nothing wrong with this TV show. There was nothing in it that was inappropriate, but for some reason I just felt like God was saying, you don't need to watch that. And so when I choose to say, yes, God, I'll obey, and then I do that, even on those things that I don't understand, that helps me dial it in even more, right? Because then God says, yeah, it works, and He'll do it even more, because He'll respond to that. And so I can't tell you exactly how it feels, I can't tell you exactly how it works, but I can tell you He's there, He wants to talk with you, and if you predetermine that you'll obey when you hear that, you'll dial it in and you'll figure it out. That's the best I got for you. I don't know. What do you think, Brian?
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
So you talked about the TV show, which I thought was really cool and everything. Did you ever get any closure on that? Because I know how sometimes God will speak to you, and then like down the road you're like, oh, I need to spend more time with my wife, or maybe someone else was talking about a TV show and there was something
that came up. So I didn't get anything huge like that, but what I did get was God completely took away the desire for me to watch that show again. So later on, like even today, I don't care. I don't even cue it up. It doesn't. I obeyed Him that one time. He said, "Don't do it," and I don't do it. And so that doesn't mean that there's not ever a struggle to obey later on. That one truly was just a purely like trust. He just said to do it, so I did it. Okay. Yeah, it was weird.
I love that you waded into those waters. I know Lisa and I, one of the strongest stories that comes to mind is we were in church together when we were living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and this lady, the service was going on. I think it was the sermon time, and she usually sat up front. And she jumps up suddenly, and she kind of comes out of the sanctuary and goes to the back, and it was so dramatic in that sense that, and so you could tell that there was something very highly intentional. It worried you, like, was she sick
okay?
Or was something going on? And later we finally found out that she said, this is her story, she said that the Holy Spirit told her, go home and share the gospel with your neighbor. And that had happened to her 2 or 3 times in the service. And she kept saying, no, I'm at church. God's like, go home, talk to your neighbor. So the second time she's like, it's church, I will after church. And then the third time was while the sermon was going on, and go now. And she said, okay. And she jumps up and goes on. Well, she goes, shares the gospel with her neighbor, who apparently was critically ill. He prays to receive Christ and dies within an hour.
Wow. And
her spirit knew that had she disobeyed God and waited for church to be over, she would have missed the moment. And those, we often call them promptings, or impressions. It's that sense. Those are very difficult. And I think as a Baptist, we like to err on the side of saying, well, if it's not clear and concrete and from the Bible, and so we err away from that. And if you're Pentecostal charismatic, you move into the arena where, that's a little, too often and too much, and I've certainly been a part of some services where things were prophesied over me that never happened and weren't true. So, there's things that you kind of go, okay, that was weird. And there's a balance somewhere in the middle, and what I found is that if you're not spending time in the Word and you're not genuinely immersing yourself in God's thoughts, when we read the Bible, you're actually learning about a person. And I feel like the more you do that, the more you learn about that person, the more the easier it becomes to discern when that person is prompting. Because I've learned about them. I'm beginning to learn what they would say. I think even with my wife, Lisa, we've been together for, we actually know our anniversary. Truth be known, we don't always know. But here's what I do. If I'm in a social setting and I'm talking to something, I will immediately cue in if I cross a line that I know later she's going to tell me in the car I shouldn't have done. Yeah, right? Because I'm getting to know her and I'm like, oh yeah, I probably should shut up, or I should, not tell that joke or something. And I think, with the Lord, the longer you're walking with Him, the more, it's easier for the Holy Spirit to do that prompting to kind of go, this is what I want you to do, or do.
Well, I wanted to piggyback on that because I'm so glad you used this big like dramatic impression, and the counterpoint mine was this little kind of like, well, that's kind of odd impression.
Yeah.
And I intentionally chose a small one for the message because I wanted people to realize if you are having this impression from God and it's only and always and it's ever this huge dramatic blah blah blah, you might want to be worried about that.
Yeah.
Because that says a little bit about you, right? What God cares about more is you, your personal relationship with Him, your growth, your learning in obedience, and by being able to be obedient in the little things, later on He can trust you to help you be obedient in the big dramatic things. And so I think, you referenced the whole us Baptists being against Him, blah, blah, blah. A lot of times when I see the people who are like, oh, God told me and it's only and it's ever always these huge, exciting, dramatic things, I'm just like, that's you, brother.
Yeah.
That's you. You're getting a lot more gratification out of this than God's getting glory, right? Yeah. But when I can choose to be obedient to like, well, I'm not going to watch that show I want to watch, or I'm not going to do that little thing because I just feel like God's telling me that. I didn't run home the next day and brag to my wife, hey, God told me not to watch this TV show. Look how spiritual I am. No, it's about a relationship with Him and growing in obedience over time to be able to say yes to the little, seemingly inconsequential things that say no to self and yes to God, and then be able to, from that, learn the big, hugely consequential things. It's training.
We shared quite a bit today about, and I always love hearing your messages because you go in dad mode.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I know personally speaking in my faith, how rich my faith became when I became a parent. You understand that love instantly. And I always like to hear your examples of you and the boys. But you're talking about obedience, and I mean this is good for all parents out here to kind of be unpacking. Is because discipline that even came up in the thread this morning. I mean which kid listens? That came up when you were giving that example. But I think giving your children the opportunity to show obedience and be faithful. Hey, because I'm going to tell you, those teenage years, the driver's license are coming, the curfew's coming, and that sort of thing. And if you didn't drill down in some of this stuff earlier on, that's going to be really hard.
Yeah. The constant conversation I have with my kids, and I start when they're really young, younger than they probably ought to be. But I say, look, what you need to understand is in relationships, trust is more important than just about anything else. And I'm watching you right now, 5 years old. I'm watching you to see if I can trust you. And do you want to be able to own a car one day? Yeah. Do you want to be able to drive and go places you want to go? Yeah. Okay, well, when I say you can't have a second cookie and you go get a second cookie and I find out, that tells me I can't trust you. And if I can't trust you with something as simple as a cookie, Daddy ain't giving you a car, buddy.
But the problem is I was prompted
The impression was there. I was in obedience to the Holy. He overrode Dad.
As Daddy's eating a hot chocolate chip cookie.
Well, that's the problem too. Is often I am the one eating the cookie too. I can't trust you, Daddy.
I think your first point hit me really, really hard because of my wiring and my temperament. The admit portion of recognizing that I need guidance. I feel like the older we get, and also the longer that we've been a Christian, the more tempted we are to say, "I've got this.
I got this.
Yeah.
I've got this." And if I'm being extremely truthful and honest, I would say that there are far too many things in my life that I do not pray and ask for guidance. There's just too many things I say, I know how to work this. I know how to handle this. I know exactly what to do. God's gifted me with leadership. That's good. But it's also a hindrance in the sense that I'm not continually saying, God, I could be wrong. I could be terribly wrong on this one, and I need a lot of guidance. Do you think that's a temperament thing, or is it just who we are as a person?
I think everybody deals with it. Maybe temperament will make it even more. But I think everybody, we like to have a hold of our thing. You know what I mean? It's our thing. I like to tell myself, well, I didn't get a clear direction on this thing, so obviously God's saying, well, whatever you choose is fine, Gary, that's good. And there's sometimes that it is okay, that both options are good, but I like to use that one, right? And just, he trusted me to make a decision on this one. I don't even need to ask him about that next one, right? Because all these are good. I'll figure it out,
Well, you trip over, one of the biggest conundrums in Christianity, which is there a perfect will of God for every single decision in my life?
Right.
Is there one college I was supposed to go to,
right.
one person I'm supposed to marry, one job I'm supposed to have? Where do you unpack that?
I land on no.
Okay, let's move on.
Moving right along.
So that's my answer, right?
But no always? Or how does that work?
That's going to be a hard one. I don't know how. You said it was one of the great Christian conundrums of all time. I believe that God broadly has an idea of what I believe God knows me better than I know myself. And I believe that God gifted and equipped me to be able to do specific things. And I believe that God knows where those things could be effectively used, right? And so that he will give me direction to be where he wants me to be able to use that. Now, does that mean that gifting and that characteristics that he gave me is good for only one exact place and time, and that's it? I don't think so, because I think that the world is way bigger and that God is way bigger than that. So I think there are multiple places that you would want a big, hairy, loud, extroverted guy, and he can be effective. There's does that make sense?
Yeah, let's do this. Let's ask you to pause with your group, and this is a great moment to stop and ask that question. What do you think? Is there a perfect will of God for every single decision that God says, well, you didn't pick the right one. You chose the wrong job, wrong college, the wrong spouse, the wrong this, wrong. And I want you to stop, pause, and talk to your group. Is there just one right, perfect will of God in every decision? Okay, with that, what do you think? How do you kind of land on some of those decision making?
Well, I think the hard part, and I brought this question up several weeks back, is I'll go back to you using your example of your kid, and I loved your example where he looks up and there's nothing more than you delighting in your son when he looks up at you. I thought about Peter on the water with Jesus, and as soon as he took his eyes off him, he fell in that pothole. He started thinking, is that as a Christian, and I think as longer you're a Christian, the harder some of this probably becomes, because you're like, I think I'm maturing. I think I'm starting to think a little more like Jesus would think and make some decisions and everything. Aha! And that's where it gets you, is because it's all of a sudden the humility leaves, and it's like, well, I got this. And you do you tend to start being pulled from God to where you're not lifting things up and not leaning on him, because he does want to delight in you, but there are some times where he won't answer that because he's like, you got this.
Yeah.
I can trust you in this. And man, that tightrope. And then sometimes you realize you're off track and you're like, I've kind of gone through the rumble strips, and this isn't good. Maybe it is that TV show. Here's how I would say that. I try to surround myself with people, and at least, it's not easy, to be able to speak into my life, to where if I'm hitting some of those times, yes, lifting it up in prayer, but I think a lot of times for me, God has spoken to me through others. And it's I always call it the inner circle. And who are you surrounding yourself with? If you do surround yourself with people that are far from God, and God wants you to still have relationships with them because you need to reach the world, but if you're leaning on them for some big decisions, that's not our benchmark. You need to have that inner circle that you can lean on. And I can tell you when I've hit rough patches, and when Liza and I, definitely we have some people that we pull close to try to lean on for those.
I think that's a huge one that you hit on. That's actually what I was sitting here thinking about, is people who struggle with indecision tend to also be people who run around and say, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? What are you thinking? What do you think? And they're, the gathering of all these voices and opinions, and what I think they're really trying to do is offload their decision.
Yeah.
Now I can safely say, well, Mary told me to do that, and I don't have to think for myself or make a decision. And the difficulty really, and we all do ask other people's thoughts and advice and counsel and wisdom in that, but the difficulty also is the inherent danger of who's the inner circle for you. I get folks that ask us about marriage counseling, and I strongly believe in needing Christian counseling. And the reason is because a counselor is still going to be someone who is helping to steer you. If I don't have a value system that says I believe in the biblical values around marriage and stuff, how could I possibly steer you to make a biblical, godly decision? So that's why I really think it's important. A counselor is nothing more than someone who's helping to guide. And so I think that inner circle, who's your inner circle? Who are the ones that you're bouncing this stuff off of to say, well, I'm struggling with this decision. What do you think? Well, it really matters who. Who's the you? Because it makes a difference if that person is not a godly person. Just look at them and say, would I like to imitate their life and their walk? And if that's true, then that's somebody that I would want to hear from in a counsel. Any thoughts on that one?
Well, what brought to my attention there is if I say, okay, this is my marriage, and I'm going to go into marriage, and I'm going to get counseling, and I don't care if it's a Christian counselor or not, just whoever it is. What that tells me is you've kind of compartmentalized your life. You've kind of said, okay, I have work life, I have religion life, I have my married life, and all like this, and your worldview is a worldview that is sectioned instead of whole, right? And so because you've said, I'm not going to allow my Christian worldview to shape the start of my marriage, I'm just going to set it to the side here. It's going to be this part of it, and then I just get to control what's going on in these other boxes of my life. When you are dealing with indecision and you approach that decision and you don't have a cohesive worldview, let alone not even God's worldview to help shape and guide you through it, it makes indecision that much bigger because you don't even know how to even approach the question anymore. Yeah. You're like, well, do I think about this from a religious point of view? Do I think about this from my family point of view? Do I think about this from a work point of view? Well, this is a work decision, so I'll think about this one and the work one. This is a family decision, I'll think about this one. And then your decisions and your flow of life just become disparate, right? And it makes it, I don't even know how you'd be able to get through. I would be so confused.
Yeah. Well, I did a discipleship training thing called Master Life. I don't know if you ever heard it, but it's loosely based on the Navigators, because what Baptists do is we steal something good, we relabel it and call it our own and make money. So Master Life was a relabeling of a Navigator system, which is a discipleship system. But they use a thing called the wheel, and they put Christ as the hub, and that becomes the first central point of every decision in my life. The verse in Master Life for that hub that has been penetrating my heart for this many years is Galatians 2:20. I've been crucified with Christ, nevertheless I'm living. So that means I got to do stuff, make decisions. Yet not I, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in this life, in this flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. putting Christ as the center hub of my life, starting there. What does Christ want? Is it Christ honoring? Is this something that's going to help Christ formation in my life? And that's why I think you can be trusted with making a lot of logical decisions if the foundation of your life begins there. That's when you can say, which college? And I think sometimes God will go, you choose.
Yeah, that's right.
If you want to live a life that's Christ honoring, you choose.
Yeah.
Because once that desire and motivation is set, I know that's going to steer you right.
Because God looks at you and he says, I know your heart.
Yeah.
And you know my heart.
Yeah.
And you know you can trust me. And guess what? Now I know I can trust you. And I'm big enough that you can pick any of those schools. I can get you through it. I can get you what you need there.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I
pretty
was
cool.
listening to a leadership podcast the other day, and it would apply here in our walk. But it talked about, it was actually John Maxwell, and a guy hit him up after his talk, and he goes, hey, if I tell my people that I'm undecided or I'm not sure about something or I'm really struggling with something, I don't agree with you there. I shouldn't be telling them that. I need to look like I'm going to take that hill and I'm going to, get through this and everything. And John, he's 70 now and he's just this wise sage, and he kind of chuckles and he goes, they already know.
They already
You don't know. So you don't have to keep that strong front. And I think sometimes in our walk, and it goes to your first point, admitting, and they know don't have it all together and everything. And the longer you dig your heels in and just try to push through that, you need some others speaking into that. And you need to lean on some folks. And I think that's where Christianity actually becomes more real, is when they realize you don't have it all together. And so, yeah. So lean on your group, lean on each other, and you're gonna need to be able to do that during those times. So,
Well, that's all the time we have, but hey, great message, Pastor Gary, continuing our series on Overwhelmed, that the Lord is my shepherd and he leads me. He leads and guides me. Well, he leads me if I let him. As long as I'm not that straying sheep.
sheeple.
Sheeple. Okay. We love you guys. Thank you for joining us and have a great time with your group. As Pastor Tim shared, we're beginning to make recommendations. You can start meeting outdoors. It's a phenomenal recommendation. Meet outdoors. Have great social distancing, physical distancing there. And what a great time to get out of Zoom and finally out into a lawn somewhere. It'll be a great time.
Yeah,
together.
post those pics because we love seeing it. I had a group do it the other day.
Show us some pictures.
Yeah, so.
We love you guys. Peace out.
See you guys.